Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain again. I've just been talking with flight control at London Airport. The temperature there is 64 degrees and the weather is clear. If you haven't already changed your watches to conform to the time difference, I suggest you do so now.
With the advent of commercial flight back in the mid-last century, pilots and businessmen found themselves in need of a tool to monitor local time and remote time zones. And so the wristwatch with the GMT complication was born. The most famous of which, probably even to this day, is the Rolex GMT Master and Master 2. It wasn't long before Pan Am pilots were wearing these as a standard. Since then, they've become one of the coolest watches to own. There's just something romantic about having that extra complication. But how the hell do you use the thing? Are you supposed to set that GMT hand to Greenwich Mean Time? And what about that turning bezel? What's that for? Surely that's only complicating things even more. Well, let's take a closer look at a few different watches that have a GMT complication and see if we can get to the bottom of it. So I've got three watches here, all with a GMT complication. This is a Grand Seiko chronograph. This is the Tudor Black Bay, also known as the Diet Pepsi, and the Rolex Explorer 2. Let's start with the Tudor, because that's the most classic style of GMT setup that we see. So at first glance, this looks basically like a three-hander, hours, minutes, and of course their sweeping seconds. But then you see this extra hand down here, that's the GMT Hand, and that works off of a 24-hour scale instead of a 12. What do I mean by that? Well, the hour hand, as you know, goes around the dial twice in one day. So from midnight to noon, and then from noon back to midnight again. So it does two sweeps. I'm stating the obvious, but these are the differences. The GMT hand takes the whole day to go all the way around, and is supposed to be read on this outer ring here, the bezel. So I'm in continental Europe right now. It is 7 in the evening, but the location of my business is actually in New York City. So I've set the GMT hand for the time there. And as you can see, it's pointing between 12 and 14. So that's 13 in the center, which of course is 1300 hours, 1 p.m. So we're 6 hours in the difference. The strange thing about GMT watches is that the GMT hand isn't independently controllable. Only the hour hand is, because the hour hand is supposed to follow you wherever you are. So I'm going to unscrew the crown here. And now we are in winding position, where we can wind the watch. Now we're going to go to the second position, and this is when things really change. Normally, in second position, you would be able to quick set that date, control it directly. Unfortunately, with a GMT watch, in most cases, you cannot directly access the date. Instead, this second position controls the hour hand. So let's say I just stepped off a flight from northern Italy here to Istanbul, Turkey. They're 1 hour ahead of us there. What I would do is set it to the second position and move it ahead 1 hour. Now we haven't lost any seconds at all. As you can tell, the movement is still running. The seconds are still ticking away there. I haven't had to stop the watch to reset the time. So I know that the watch is still accurate. I just pushed it ahead an hour. But the GMT hand has stayed where it is. So I can tell that it's still just after 1 in New York. But now my local time is 12 minutes past 8. Now, if I go to the third position, what does that control? Well, that controls everything in a normal fashion. That's for setting the time. As you can see, all three hands are moving. Clearly the minutes hand, but the hour hand is moving as normal, as is the GMT hand. So what you have to do in this setting is to set the GMT time and the minutes. So let's say you're a pilot working out of New York City, and it's 6 p.m. in the evening on the 15th. I've set the GMT hand for 1800 hours right there. That's 6 in the evening. And now I'm going to set my hour hand, so push back into the second position. Sorry, I went all the way back to the first, but reverse there, one position. And then we're going to push that hour hand to 6 in the evening. Right there. So now it's 6 on the hour hand and 6 on the GMT hand. They're both telling the same time. One is just on the 12 hour scale and the other is on a 24-hour scale, but it's exactly the same time. Now I can push back in, screw in my crown, and away we go. But let's say I'm just stepping off a flight that I took from New York to Los Angeles, which of course is 3 hours behind. Now what I'm going to do is unscrew the crown, move the crown to the second position, and move that hour hand back by 3 hours. So now instead of 4 minutes to 6 in the evening, it's 4 minutes to 3 in the afternoon. But my GMT hand is telling me what time it is still in New York. That's how it works. If you find reading the 24-hour scale a little confusing, just note how they've color-coded the bezel. This will be nighttime and this will be daytime. So this is from 6 in the evening as the sun is going down, midnight here, and then to 6 in the morning when the sun rises. So this would be noon when the sun is at its highest position in the sky. So how do you set the date? Well, in second position, where you're controlling the hour hand, you need to go through day by day. That'll be noon and coming around to midnight. And you see it's ticking away there and changing date. And in case you're wondering, yes, let's say it's the 15th or 16th, and right now we're on the 17th, you're going to have to actually go through the entire month to find your way back to the 16th. Now, certain GMTs have a retrograde date, so you can actually go backwards and the date will go in reverse. Very, very handy. But in most cases, I would not risk it unless you're absolutely sure. There is the new Tudor Black Bay Pro that apparently has that feature. I think that's really nice. But in most cases, the date wheel should go forward. Otherwise, you risk damaging the movement. So once again, after you've wound your watch in first position, move it to the third position all the way out. The movement hacks, as you can see there. The seconds hand has stopped. Now adjust the time on your GMT hand first. So let's say it's 17 there, 1700 hours. So that's 5 p.m. Then set your minutes hand. Let's say it's exactly 5 past 5. Now we re-engage the movement and it starts up again. And now move to second position where we can adjust our local time. If we're still in New York where we're based, we want it at 5 p.m. so they're both telling the same time. But if we've taken a flight to California, we're stepping off that flight, we want to go back 3 hours to 2 p.m. Or if we've flown to Dublin in Ireland, we want to move forward 5 hours. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 10 in the evening in Dublin and 5 in the late afternoon in New York. But let's say my daughter takes a flight from Italy over to see her cousins in Los Angeles. And for the few days she's there, I'd like to keep an eye on the local time in LA instead of New York. Does that mean I have to get back in and reset the whole thing and change the GMT hand position? No. And that's what this bidirectional bezel is for. We know that Los Angeles is 3 hours behind New York. So what we're going to do is move the bezel clockwise, move the time forward, because of course Los Angeles is behind by 3 hours, so it's going to take more time to catch up. So I'm going to move the bezel forward 3 hours to 1400 hours now, 2 p.m. in Los Angeles. So I'm in Dublin and it's 10 p.m. and I can see that it's 2 p.m. in LA for the duration of her visit. Then when she goes home, I can move it back to where it was and I'm back to monitoring New York time again. That's how you navigate the globe with your GMT watch. Now with the Explorer 2, the bezel does not move. It's a fixed 24-hour bezel. Why would they take away that feature, I hear you ask? Well, this watch was not designed for jet setters or pilots. It was actually made for spelunkers. There are people who go down inside these huge caves and spend hours, sometimes days down there, diving and exploring caves. There's no natural light down there. So, for example, on the 12-hour scale here on the dial, the hour hand is pointed at 2. But is that 2 p.m. or 2 a.m.? When there's no natural light around, how do you know? That's why there's a GMT hand on this. it's pointing at 1400 hours, which is 2 in the afternoon. So this watch can be used by pilots or travelers in exactly the same way. The only thing you can't do is get that extra third time zone going with the bezel. So let's set the time and date of this Explorer 2, but instead let's put that GMT hand on GMT time, Greenwich Mean Time, Greenwich in England, of course. Hey Siri.
Uh-huh.
What time is it in Greenwich, England?
In Greenwich, England, it's 6:52 p.m.
So firstly, we go to our third position to set our GMT hand. So what does Siri say? 6:52. That is 1800 hours. Let's put it on 53 now to be safe. Now we have to set our hour hand, and simultaneously let's do the date also. It's currently the 14th of August, so we got a ways to go. Let's speed it up. And we go through and just remind ourselves again, local time 7:55, so that's almost 8 p.m. There we go. Lastly, we have this beautiful Grand Seiko, very complicated piece with not only the date and GMT, but also chronograph timer too. A very advanced piece indeed. So as we can see, our GMT hand here, this long one with the red arrow at the end, is set for 6 p.m. I want to set that for New York time. So I'm going to go all the way out to the farthest position. The movement has now hacked. And I'm going to go back to 1 p.m. on the GMT hand, which is down here, 1300 hours. You see the 13 on the dial there. So that's 1300 hours. Our time is 7:44, which is 1:44 in New York. So let's set the minutes to 44 for now. We can readjust that in a moment. Now I'm going to go to our second position and go through setting the date and the hour hand at the same time. So today is the 14th, and right now we're on the 12th, so we've got to move ahead 2 days. Now it's changed to the 13th, so we know we're at 3 a.m. Go through noon, all the way around, now hitting midnight on the 14th, all the way through the day. Now we're getting into the evening, getting close to the real hour. Past 7, so 7:45. And now we have our 2 time zones set beautifully. Obviously with this there is no movable bezel, so no third time zone, but let's cut it a break there. It's already doing a lot of other functions.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope I was able to unlock some of the mystery of the GMT watch for you. GMTs are still some of my favorite watches. I always get a thrill when I see that extra complication on a dial. It adds something to the watch. It's just super cool. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one.
It was a pleasure to have you aboard our Jet Clipper. We hope to have you with us again soon. Thank you.